Welcome to this week's edition of the Dugout Dish Podcast. I am Andy Kirikides, joined by my wonderful co-host Keith Glasser. How we doing?
Great. How are you?
Another college baseball roundup with our main man, our frequent guest, resident college baseball expert, Jonathan Grasse. What's up, man?
What's up, guys? How are you?
Good. Before we get started, two topics that are very relevant to college baseball right now. So I want to give us each a quick minute to kind of give our thoughts on a couple things. First things first, House versus NCAA settlement kind of made it through its first hurdle, I guess. It's been passed. There's going to be some challenges. There's already been one that has been submitted around Title IX, but obviously some implications for Division I baseball on a couple of different fronts. So, Jonathan, what are your kind of takeaways on this? Any specific thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's interesting. They got it through, right? Like you said, they got over the first hurdle, and 4 to 5 days later, as we sit here on June the 11th, they already had their first, appeal to it. I thought all along, just working in college athletics, that was going to be a hurdle that they were going to have with the Title IX stuff, because I think when you're looking at it and you're reading into it and you're kind of sifting through it, when people were talking about it, I think you saw, and I know, I think I was on this show at one point, we talked about it, like, the Olympic sports were going to be drastically impacted by this. And whatever your, argument for or against, they were going to be affected. That's just, there's no way around that. I think the interesting part is like, baseball's kind of moving into, this realm. And I know we'll get up to this in a second, but like, you can turn on, 5 networks, a week and a half ago and watch college baseball. That wasn't the case 10 years ago. So, baseball's turning into that next behind men's basketball and football, that next big, sport, and, revenue and, and distribution of the money it's not going away. So I think it'll be interesting to see, with some of these appeals, how it all, kind of unfolds, and then ultimately what's passed and what's not.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. I mean, for me, I think there's a couple things that I gravitate to specifically from a baseball perspective is like, we got the roster stuff, right? And I think that was one of the things that was going to happen. So we got to get down to 34, right? So you're having kind of a cut from 40 to 34. You're looking at, 1,800 roster spots are going away. The caveat to that, I think, is really interesting is this idea of grandfathering kids in, right? If you can designate somebody as one of those grandfathered in athletes, they will not count against your roster unless you're giving them money. In that case, they would. So if you give them scholarship money or NIL money or any kind of distribution from the revenue sharing, they would count against your roster. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what kind of loopholes, how schools navigate this, because if you can, you're going to get extra guys on your roster. It's just that simple. It helps you practice better, gives you a little bit of a buffer for injuries, so on and so forth. So there's that piece of it. But from a pure scholarship roster management perspective, I actually think doing away with the scholarship minimum is one of the more impactful things. It's not going to impact the big schools that much because they're going to have so many scholarships that they're able to allot. I don't know how many schools are going to go to 34, but I think you're getting in that like mid-20s, upper 20s range in terms of scholarships. But if you're a low division or a mid-division one type school, you're probably not going to see a significant increase in scholarship money that's allotted to your program, if any. But the fact that you now have total control of how you distribute that money, I think it really, really helps people manage their rosters. Because there are a lot of cases like where the math doesn't fully add up, and it can get hard to actually spend 11-7 when you have a 25% minimum of athletic money that you have to distribute to somebody in order to give them that money. Now, being able to give a kid $5,000, $8,000, $10,000, I think that's going to help. And I think it's something that should have happened a long time ago. But for me, the grandfather in thing, and then the doing away of the the scholarship minimum, I think is a huge step in the right direction for college baseball. What do you got on this, Keith?
I think all of the things that you two just talked about, I think are widely accepted amongst people who are in this industry. I also think that the NIL collective, or the NIL clearinghouse that they're trying to set up coming out of this House settlement is going to be interesting to follow. What does that look like? It's in its infancy, obviously. I think they just named the president of said clearinghouse last week, right before this settlement was agreed upon last Friday. So, there's going to be a lot of bumps in the road. What does market value look like? Anything over $600 needs to be approved. What, quote unquote, will get approved faster than other things? But I think it's the return back to what the NIL was originally intended for, where student athletes can benefit from their name, image, and likeness while they're in college, not necessarily collectives of boosters that are pooling money and then, essentially paying student athletes to pay for their play for their colleges. So, I think that's going to be a wildly interesting thing to follow, because I think that that's probably going to end up with litigation surrounding that, because you're going to have people that are saying, well, what, market value is what people are willing to pay, not what you tell me it is. So that stuff, I think, to me is going to be very interesting, especially at some of the upper levels and some of the numbers that I've heard thrown around. But I wanted to say one thing before we kind of dive into the next topic. But Jonathan, you were talking about, you didn't get to watch the amount of regionals and supers that we saw on baseball 10 years ago, like we did this past weekend. And I was thinking about it this morning. I was at the gym and Sports Center was on, and they were ranking their top 5 who they thought in Omaha fan base was going to be able to take the most Jello shots in Omaha, which, watching that and being in this business for as long as I have, that is a foreign concept to someone like us 5 years ago or even 10 years ago. Like, you'd see it on Twitter, right? Like, you'd blow up on Twitter, but Sports Center designated a segment to taking the 8 teams that are there and being like, all right, what fan bases are going to be able to pool, are going to be able to buy the most Jello shots in Omaha. And for those of you that don't know, it is a tradition at Omaha where they have, Jello shots are bought at a bar. And then the vast majority of that money is donated to very good causes once the College World Series is over. So it does go to a good cause. It is, obviously you have to be 21 years old to buy said Jello shots, but there are some fan bases out there that are regularly in Omaha that show up and show out when it comes to the purchase of said Jello shots. So I thought it was interesting that, Sports Center designated a segment to that when, that's something that would not even be thought of, 5 years ago or even 10 years ago. So like the growth and where college baseball is at has been super fun to watch, obviously being in it and us at coaching it, but watching it now on the outside of like how big it's gotten and how many people are at these games and what you see on social media and all this stuff. I think it's awesome for this game.
I know there's a lot of people happy that LSU got in there.
Oh, there are a lot of people that LSU got happy that they got in.
There's going to be some Jello shots that will be had by some of those Bayou Bengals, I can tell you.
Oh, yeah, baby.
When they get in, them in Arkansas, when they get in, there's some people that are pretty excited. So
Yeah, it's a wild time up there. I've never been. Probably need to make that a part of the old baseball bucket list one of these days, though. Another hot topic. There are about 5,500 young men who have entered the transfer portal, and less than 400 of them are currently committed right now. Wild times in college baseball for a lot of reasons, some of which we just spoke about with a lot of the changes that are coming. But the transfer portal is certainly a hot topic. Coach Glass, any thoughts on what's going on right now? I know we've covered it a little bit, but it's chaos in there right now, and the math isn't mathing for a lot of these boys that are going in. And what do you got?
Yeah, I think it's a multitude of things, and I'm probably not going to touch on every single one of them that are currently happening. But it's not just the proverbial you're not good enough to play here, so you should go to play somewhere else, or I'm not happy where I'm at and I want to go and find a better landing place for myself. I think with the amount of money that's involved, I think there are a lot of third parties behind the scenes that are trying to work deals for people to get them into spots where they're making more money and maybe being able to increase their draft stock, things like that. And quite frankly, I think there's some people who are doing it that, don't necessarily know what they're doing, if you want my honest opinion. I've had some conversations with people where, they're getting calls to get NIL money increased on guys that pitched at a 12 this year. And, that's just not going to happen, and I think that, there's some people who have one foot out the door, and, I think there's a decent amount of programs that are going to help you take that second foot right out the door. And it's going to be a hard landing spot for people. And I think that, there's a lot of things that go into your decision to get into the transfer portal. There's a lot of, reasons to why you might do it, whether you were told, whatever it might be. But I think that if you are one of the 5,500 kids that are in the transfer portal, and if you're listening to this, like, you need to have an honest self-assessment of where you're at. And I think that, I see it every day on Twitter, multiple times a day, where, I'm 94 to 96 and I have an 82 mile an hour slider. And with that said, I'm entering the transfer portal and there's zero stats. And I can tell you unequivocally, as somebody who still thinks like a college baseball player, I know that your stats are not good, because I go and I look you up and I immediately see that you pitched at a 15 and you had 3 innings and you walked 12 guys and you hit 6 and you had 9 hits. Like, you need to understand that doesn't play. And I think that we're in an era where we have people that are I don't want to say that we conflate how good we actually are and what it is we're capable of doing. And I think that's in part where we kind of land with some of this stuff. And I think that we're looking at the outliers of the guys that are transferring from lower divisions or lower mid-major Division I programs up and finding success and thinking that is for everyone. And that's just not the case. Those are the outliers. There's not a lot of guys that are going to transfer from a mid-major Division I school up to the ACC or SEC and then all of a sudden be first or second round draft picks. Like, there's only 32 of them, 64 of them if we want to add them up, and we could probably sprinkle in a couple comp picks in there if we want to. But it's less than 100 dudes, and a good portion of those guys are already at some of those schools. So, I think that, there's a multitude of issues, and, I think it's probably a PSA for a lot of people that we need to get back to actually playing baseball and understanding that your metrics, while you can put them out all you want, but you need to understand that once you actually have in-game stats and video and things, like, it's going to show up, and you might not end up at a place where you think you should, and that's okay. Like, you might have to transfer down. You might end up at a place where you think you might be better than, but you have to. If you're going to enter the transfer portal and you want to go up, like, you need to have shown up when the lights are on and done it. And that's just the straight facts of the matter. Like, that's currently where we're at. Like, you have a lot of guys that don't really have the stats to match the metrics and are in the transfer portal, and there's a reason. So you need to figure out what it is that you need to do better and find a spot where you can develop those things to get yourself to be a better baseball player, so that you can find the spot that you ultimately can succeed for the next 2, 3, 4 years as a student athlete in college. But, I think there's a lot of things that are going on. I've talked to a lot of guys over the course of the last week, and I just think that's kind of where we're at. It obviously it bothers me to this point. Like, I didn't think I was going to get this fired up about it, but like, it bothers me with where we're at, because I think we've gone so metrics driven, and this is where we're at. And honestly, I think we're going to get better once the rosters get down to 34 and this grandfathering thing, however that kind of sorts itself out from the house settlement thing. But like, there's going to come a point in time where, like, there's not going to be a lot of guys that are going to get plucked out of the transfer portal. And I think the last thing I'll say is, like, you need to understand going in, if you don't necessarily have those stats that are going to show up that coaches are looking for, like, you might not find yourself a spot at the level in which, or even at all, for what you want to do. So, JUCO is always a great option from a development standpoint, or going down a division to kind of figure out, what it is you need to do to get better.
What do you got on this topic, Coach Grasset?
Well, I think Keith makes a lot of really good points. I think there's, there's three categories of the transfer portal. There is a player that is at said mid-major that was conference player of the year, was first team all conference, that is looking to transfer up to potentially make more money, or get paid or whatever. There are players that are at higher levels or even the mid levels that are saying, I'm better than what my stats are, like kind of what Keith said. And then there's guys that are told that they have to go in there. So there is also that. So I always get, frustrated. I know it's 5,500, it's a huge number, but there's probably a third of the players in that thing that have been told you're going in it, like by the coaching staff. So, okay, yes, that number is too high, but let's also remember there are kids that are, kind of getting looped into this, that they're just looking to make money. They're looking to go up a division, but they didn't really have a choice in the matter. They were told they're going into that thing. I think and I know me and you talked about this last week and you blew me away by it, to be honest with you, Andy, when you said it. And I saw it today for the first time. I saw so-and-so his agent has committed to blank place. And I'm like, wow, that's where we're at. His agent leaked to a Twitter handle that, reports college baseball news. And it said, per the agent, so-and-so is committed to blank place. And I thought, wow, like, again, kind of like, what Keith said, like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we have come a long way where we got guys that have agents that are leaking information on Twitter about, and it was a player that was a conference player of the year, and he was going up and he's going to a major school. But it just really surprised me that, like, we've come a really long way. And again, some of it is a good thing. And for those players that, did maybe commit to that mid-major and, maybe now have the opportunity to get paid, like, I think for a long time, the coaches were in the driver's seat and they held all the control. Well, we have pulled that e-brake, and that e-brake is now a 180 degrees the other way. And the players hold all the control for the most part. So, do we probably need to land somewhere in the middle? Yeah, I would say so. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's, you can transfer once, it limits that. Like, I know there's talk, obviously, with the house settlement, with contracts that you can lock these kids into contracts with buyouts, but I don't think that's going to work because the high-end player is going to just negotiate with the school he originally commits to not have a buyout. So I know Jay Billis has been big on that with, you were just going to put buyouts in these kids' contracts. Well, okay, yeah, that's great on paper, but like, we all know how it works, right? Like, when you recruit a kid, you need leverage. It's just like negotiating any contract. Like, you want to have leverage. So if Ole Miss tells me I don't have to have a buyout, but Tennessee says I do, well, I'm going to have to play that, into my cards when I make a decision. So to just blanket statement say that, and I know he has good intentions in what he's trying to say with all the, the contract and the buyout will slow it down. But like, I mean, I read it, the first time this morning, and I'm like, well, I'll just go somewhere I don't have a buyout. And somebody will put in an ad that I don't have to have a buyout. So good intentions. I don't think it will slow much down, maybe a little bit. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Like, it's crazy you pop on Twitter and it's your whole feed.
Well, even the guys that you had, I mean, you saw before the transfer portal even opened. Like, we had people reporting that guys were committed before the portal was open to other schools. Like, I mean, listen, the new one, which the loophole is, which is great, right? Is they go in with the do not tag or do not contact tag. Yeah.
And then they just have an agent negotiate what the schools that they want to talk to. So basically what it does is it alleviates them to having to hear from 55 schools. and they can just basically just reach out to those staffs because the agent and say, hey, he's available. This is what the number is. This is what we have to get to.
Right.
Like it's like what?
The portal wasn't opened yet, and it was like quote unquote is committed. Like, I mean, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but you can't commit yet. How is this happening? But it goes to show like that what's going on behind the scenes. Like this is something that again 10 years ago was foreign. Yeah. Like this is what's happening right now, and it's I don't want to say that we have to completely embrace it, but I do think there's some middle ground in there where like because if we don't adapt, we die. But I think that there's got to be some guardrails put around what this is, where like, hey, if this is what's going on, I mean, you've heard it we've all talked to coaches, you've heard it like, yeah, so-and-so reached out to this guy on my team in March. Like, you know what's happening.
Yeah, there's definitely some nefarious activity that's going on. I mean, you get some of these mid-major kids who start to blow up in the middle of the year. Like some of this stuff's done well before the portal, right? I mean, for people who don't think that that's the case, you're pretty naive to how this all works. For me, I think like I'm on record saying this. I think the portal is a really good thing for a lot of reasons. Kids go to school. Sometimes it doesn't work out for a variety of different reasons. And I like the idea that kids have the ability to move to a place that might be a better fit for them. The one caveat to that is that if you're not one of those guys who was told you have to go into the portal, and Jonathan mentioned that, right? And you're seeing more and more of that right now because of the impending roster cuts, right? Guys have to make decisions. They're hard decisions. Coaches don't want to have to make them. But you have to have those conversations with kids at the end of the year. I was in the room when we did that stuff in college. They're the worst conversations you have to have, but you do it from a place of, hey, it's not going to work out here, man. But you can play in college. Like, we'll help you try to find another spot. The thing that I have a problem with is that kids bailing from competition, right? And not getting exactly what they want right away with the expectation that, like, I'm a freshman, I'm supposed to play, and then you start nitpicking on, well, I didn't get consistent at bats, and how am I supposed to get into a rhythm? Or I didn't, I'm a starter and I threw out of the bullpen, and you start to make a lot of excuses as to why you weren't successful and not really being able to look in the mirror and just say, hey, I need to get better. Like most freshmen don't play. And I think that I struggle with that because the guys who are willing to stick it out in some of these programs and they're not leaving because they were told to leave, but they're leaving because they think that the next place they go, the resistance to get on the field is going to be less. I think kids who shy away from the competition and the fact that you need to earn yourself playing time at the college level, those kids, it's not going to work out for them. The kids who are willing to sit down with a coach and gather the feedback and figure out, well, what do I need to do over the next 3 months to make sure that my sophomore year goes the way that I want it to go? Those kids will be successful. The kids that run from that competition, it's not going to work out for them the next place that they go. I firmly believe that. I've watched it happen plenty of times. So I think that's the thing that trips me up with the transfer portal. I get the mid-major guys moving up. Like, yeah, go get paid, man. You hit 21 bolts and 360, like, and you're a sophomore. Like, yeah, Tennessee's calling. Like, go. Absolutely. Go get your money. Go play in the SEC. Go play with the big boys and see what happens. Good for you. But the kids that run from it, that makes me a little bit sad because I think it goes against the spirit of college sports where sometimes you got to dig in and you got to find a way to get on the field. And the kids who have that kind of grit, it usually works out for them. So that's really all I got to say on the subject. Let's get to the fun stuff. We got Omaha coming up, fellas. We were dreadful with our picks. I mean, shouldn't say dreadful. I think each of us had at least 2 or 3 teams in our preseason pick that made it to Omaha. I can't speak for everybody here, but my preseason national championship pick is still in the mix. But we got a heck of a field. We got some really awesome storylines. I'm going to list the teams here real quick, and then I want to take a second and kind of recap some of the drama from the Supers. So we got Coastal. They continue to just freaking play. Went into Auburn. Awesome. Arizona made it through. Oregon State made it through. Louisville, UCLA, Murray State, LSU, and the Omahawks from Arkansas. That's our field of 8. But Jonathan, give me some thoughts on the Super here. What do you got? What fired you up? What disappointed you?
I thought it was a really good weekend. I was disappointed we only got one game on Monday, just because I know in years past it's been a fun Monday where if you get 3 games, they'll usually like stack them. They'll go like 1, 4, and 8 or something like that. So that was a little disappointing, but I mean, that happens. You got the lone standalone game with Murray State. I'm absolutely blown away that they got it done. Kudos to that coaching staff. I mean, that is as impressive of a job as you're going to see. I mean, to win game 3 on the road, you basically emptied the bullpen the night before to get there. Really cool. So that would be my first one. I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, the Coastal is just a unit right now. Like, they're a problem. They're playing really, really, really good. That coaching staff has done it before in Omaha. So, and I say this all the time, and I've said it the last 3 years, I think, when we've done this. Having gone to Omaha and having been there and knowing the timeline, the way that the rest works, the practice, the fans, all that stuff is a huge advantage. So I think even though Coach Chanel wasn't the head coach on that team that won it all, they'll know what they're doing out there. Where teams that are doing it for the first time or coaching staffs that are doing it for the first time, I think it makes it a little bit trickier to go into it. So that would be my second takeaway. Like, they're playing awesome. Like, they're going to be a problem. Arkansas is, wash, rinse, repeat. I mean, I know I had Tennessee winning last weekend, so I missed on that one. But I mean, in that building, I thought that was going to play a factor. Big time performance out of them. I was very impressed with them. I would say they might have been the most impressive in terms of them and Coastal. I would say, really, really, really looked good. Arizona did a phenomenal job. The fact that they came back, I mean, they were basically left for dead. On I guess that was Saturday. Come back, make a huge rally, and then take it on Sunday, which was pretty legit. And then I still have my pick to win it all. So I think LSU's they're going to be a tough out with that pitching, with the rest in Omaha. We've talked about before. If you're a loyal listener and you've heard us, the rest is different because you got every other day. You can line that bullpen up. They can finagle the starters a little bit. They got obviously the 2 at the front that are big boys. Like, they're going to be a tough out. So,
What's your opening statement here, Coach Glass?
I thought what Arizona did at UNC, I thought was pretty impressive, especially after being boat raced 18-2 on Friday night. Come back and win 10-8 on Saturday, and then gut out a 4-3 win on Sunday, which it kind of went in reverse for those of you that follow college baseball, where usually Sunday's your hit day. They gutted that out. I thought that was really impressive what they did. Coastal's a juggernaut right now. I went through and did the free 90s for the 8 College World Series teams right now, and they're averaging 6.1 free 90s a game. So I'm really impressed. Like, they can flat out stuff it on the mound, which can really help. And to Jonathan's point that you've been there before, you know how to kind of stack this up. Like, I think that they're a force to be reckoned with there. When I didn't necessarily, I'll eat crow here, and I didn't think they were going to get out of the Conway Regional. So the fact that they're just shoving it right down our throats, that they're really good, is pretty impressive. Arkansas, I mean, can't say enough good things about them. The LSU, I thought they were super tough. I thought the Oregon State, Florida State series was actually really good, especially with Florida State going literally across the country diagonally to play up in Eugene, or excuse me, in Corvallis. they lost 5-4 on Friday night. Then they won, I think 3 or 4 to 1 on Saturday. And then there was Oregon State exploded, I think, for 7 in the first. And not that that game was put away, but they ended up winning, relatively easily. Louisville, Miami was an electric series. I watched a decent amount of that because that was a 12 o'clock game every day. Louisville was packed. I thought the atmosphere was awesome. It was cool to see that many people turn out to the Super Regional. I mean, they were all the way around the field, stacked up in like 30 rows in the outfield, sitting on the wall, or the hill, I should say. But lastly, I thought what Murray State has done, with what they've done with that team being out of the, a mid-major conference, they won it. They got through an Ole Miss, a Western Kentucky, and Georgia Tech regional that was stacked, and then went into Durham and took 2 of 3 from Duke. And that game Monday night, like I was disappointed too, Jonathan. I was hoping for a bunch of Monday games, but I mean, that game was a really great game to watch, even with some drama at the end with the controversial interference call that I didn't think it was interference live. I texted everyone and said, I don't think that's actually interference. And they ultimately got the call right. But that's a 50-50 call. But to then dogpile, reset, and then get a rollover ground ball out to get out of that in a 1-run game with the tying run on first base in the bottom of the ninth on the road, I think shows how tough those guys are. And that coaching staff's done a phenomenal job, and I'm excited to see what they can do in Omaha.
Yeah, for me, there's a couple things that stuck out. One was how thin the margins can be when you get 2 really good teams on the field together. I watched pretty much start to finish the first game of the Oregon State Florida State game up in Corvallis, and there was a couple pieces of that game that I thought were really interesting. I think it's something that you two would really appreciate. Is the Bellini kid from Florida State is just absolutely stuffing it on Oregon State. I mean, it's super high level command. It's a couple different breaking balls for strikes. He was burying it. The fastball's up, it's down, it's in and out. I mean, he was putting on an absolute clinic of how to dice up an incredibly talented Oregon State team. He ends up getting pulled after 6 2/3. He went up to about 114 pitches. But I thought the reason that Oregon State ended up winning this game was Oregon State was able to extend an inning in the 5th. And they probably tacked on an extra 16 or 17 pitches to Bellini's pitch count by bunting for hits. And for those of you who watch, Bellini's a big boy. Wouldn't call him, when you get him off of the dirt, I wouldn't call him a plus athlete. And the Oregon State offense took advantage of it and were able to extend that inning to the point where they were able to get him out probably an inning earlier than Link would have liked, which led to them going to one of their stud relievers, the Charles kid, who was absolute nails for 2 innings. He's throwing 2 different shaped breaking balls. One's at like 84 miles an hour. The one's like top bottom at 78. And he's carving dudes up. And Oregon State is battling their like really, really tough offense in terms of how they go about their business. And the other margin here that I thought was really interesting is that the Creed kid's up. They just thrown a wild pitch to get the tying run to second base. And the Creed kid's up, and Charles throws 2 absolutely just sexy breaking balls, probably a half ball off the edge. He gets Krieg to swing over the top of both of them. And he throws another breaking ball, and he misses by maybe 2 inches. And he just catches a little bit too much of the plate. And Krieg's able to get that ball in the left field. Arquette comes up the next inning, doubles, and that was kind of the end of the game. But when you talk about how thin the margins are, like 2 bunt plays and 1 pitch that misses by 2 inches was probably the difference in that series. I thought that was fascinating. That Florida State team is really, really good. But Oregon State was able to do some stuff to get out of there. And then the other thing that struck me on Sunday with Arizona and UNC was some of these young bucks and the composure that these kids have, right? You're talking a winner take all to go to the College World Series, and UNC and Arizona run out 2 freshmen. Ryan Lynch and Smith Bailey, and those two did not bat an eye. And I was blown away not only with their ability to pitch. The stuff is awesome. Both those guys have a chance to be first round picks here in a couple of years. But the composure of those young men, I think, really stuck out. And I think it's something that separates good players from really, really good players and great players is it takes a special kind of kid. And Jonathan, me and you have talked about this. And I think Keith, me and you have as well. It takes a different type of kid to be able to play in that type of environment. And to see two 18-year-old kids go and do that, I was pretty blown away by what those guys were able to do. I think my other takeaway, you guys touched on Murray State. Obviously, it's awesome. Arkansas looks really tough. Coastal looks really tough. UCLA quietly took UTSA to the woodshed out on the West Coast this weekend. And that UTSA team is playing as good as anybody in the country. And UCLA, just from first pitch, 18 consecutive innings, just flat out outplayed a really, really good and hard to play against UTSA team. John Savage looks like he's got that UCLA program back. I'm really interested to see what they do this week. The way they play typically translates pretty well to that park. But yeah, I thought that was one of the things that they might not be getting enough attention right now for what they did out there because there was some other really cool stuff that happened, particularly Murray State and Coastal. So those are my big takeaways. Couple fun facts that are probably worth discussing. The SEC is not dead. They still have more teams in the World Series than anybody else. But you've got representation from the Missouri Valley, the Big Ten, the ACC, an independent school, the Big 12, the SEC, and the Sun Belt Conference. It's 7 different conferences if you count independent. And this is the first time since 1999, which is the first time we went to a super regional format, that a team who had played in the College World Series the previous year, let me accurately phrase this. Nobody in this year's field played in Omaha last year, and that is the first time that's happened since 1999. And the Pac-12 really jacked up that football conference because if they just stayed together, they'd have 3 teams in the College World Series. So, Keith, I know you got some interesting numbers, and we talk about this. We've talked about it here. We've talked about it around pitching. We've talked about the importance of defense. But you took some time to dig into a couple things here around free bases, right? Which is walks, hit by pitches, wild pitches, stolen bases, errors. I think you have a
pass
couple
balls.
more in there. Pass balls. Basically,
So there's 7.
Yeah, who gives up
pass
free
balls? Yeah, so
Keith, you go first. Keith, you go first. But I got something to add with the fielding stuff too. That's going to tie exactly into what you're saying.
Sure. So I went through and did the free 90s, something I tracked when I was in coaching, and it kind of gives you an accurate representation of, how many quote unquote free 90s you're likely to get over the course of the game. This does not count hits, anything at all, right? So nothing you earn to get on. So walks, hit by pitches, errors, pass balls, wild pitches, stolen bases, and balks. So anything that can get you a free 90 feet. Arkansas in this setting for the 8 teams that are in Omaha, Arkansas leads the pack. They're averaging 6.02 per 9 innings. Coastal's in second with 6.11. Arizona's third, 6.95. LSU is fourth at 7.48. Oregon State is fifth with 7.56. 6 is UCLA with 7.79. Murray State is 7th with 7.97. And Louisville is last with 10.4. And generally speaking, again, this kind of lends itself to how many, quote unquote, free bases that is that you're kind of going to expect over the course of 9 innings. Now, obviously, it's an average, so some are going to be lower, some are going to be higher, depending on what it is, but it at least gives you a framework of what you're going to get. I think the impressive thing to me is, first and foremost, are the 2 at the top, and Arkansas and Coastal being, right around 6. If you go look at their walk to strikeout numbers, it's an absolute joke. Off the top of my head, and I don't have it in front of me, I think Coastal walked roughly 180, and Arkansas walked roughly 160 over the course of the year, and both of them were north of 500 in punch-outs. And there's not a lot of hit by pitches in there as well. So even if it does, it kind of creeps up into the, Arkansas, I don't even know if they're over 200 with hit by pitches. It creeps close, but I'm not sure they're over. Coastal, I think, is a tad bit over, where everyone else has at least 200 walks as a staff. But, it kind of tells you that, like, you're going to have to earn everything it is you get against those pitching staffs when you go play them. The other side is they all defend at a pretty high clip for the most part, where, for the most part, balls that are going to be put in play, like, there's a very high likelihood that you are going to be out. I think we were talking about it earlier today, Andy, where Arkansas, I think, is fielding 977 as a team. Is that what it was? Or is that the short stop?
984.
984, I stand corrected, as the team.
Yeah,
like,
Mr. Alloy at shortstop.
An absurd number from a fielding statistic over the course of 63 games at the college level. So, like, you generally speaking, like, you have a 98.4% chance of getting out on any ball that you put in play. So, like, it's going to be incredibly hard. And, you get to Omaha, the margins are thin. Like, you have to earn what it is that you're going to get. So, I like to look at these things and, kind of see where people stack up. If I was a betting man, I would not necessarily bet on Louisville to be in the championship. I would put my money on, the ones that are in the sixes and the sevens, which is 7 of the 8, but the sixes and the low to mid sevens of being the teams that are likely to be standing towards the end of when we get to the final series.
All right, so I'm going to piggyback off that. So outside of Louisville, because if you look at their metrics, it's actually almost a miracle that they're there.
Yes.
Now they do some stuff really well, but in terms of, like, when you're looking at the rest of the field, it's pretty remarkable. Every team or 7 of the 8 are in the top 28 in fielding percentage in the country. So out of 306 teams or 309 teams. And 7 of the 8 are in the top 31 in errors per game. Pretty wild.
Extremely.
It's a run prevention sport, whether people like it or not.
And
like, you get into some of the ERA stuff, like Coastal's number 2 in the country, LSU's number 9, Arkansas's number 10, Oregon State's number 20, UCLA's number 23. Like, they do the run prevention stuff, playing defense, not walking people. They strike a lot of people out. Like, they do that stuff at a higher clip than all these other teams. And I mean, some of the fielding percentages, like, you look at them, Oregon State 982, UCLA 982, LSU 981, Arkansas 984. I mean, that's a joke that these kids play defense at that type of a clip. There's big league clubs who will finish this year with fielding percentages in a very similar. And I'm not saying that they're big league quality. The game is different. But what I am getting at is they don't make mistakes. I mean, I was looking at it this morning. The shortstop for Arkansas, Mr. Alloy, who's just a fantastic player. He's going to make a lot of money here in a couple weeks. But you're talking about a shortstop in the SEC. It's the fastest baseball that you play. That kid has 5 errors on the whole year. He's touched the ball over 220 times during the course of the year and is only messed up 5 times. I mean, that's just absurd that a shortstop at 21 years old plays defense that clean. And these other teams have guys like it. Like Iva Arquette is another one. I mean, you watch that kid play shortstop, and it's poetry. I mean, the kid, he makes it look so easy, and some of the defensive talent. And we've talked about this. Like, you want to play college baseball, you got to be able to defend. If this doesn't tell you that good teams play defense, I don't know what does. Right?
Andy,
the defensive teams are still alive.
Like the metrics, but I want to say last year, I believe when we did the World Series pod, the 3 of us discussed something similar to this in terms of the defense and how high level it is at once you get and like you said, like, and even at the high school level, like the margins are so thin. They're so tight. They're paper thin. Errors will kill you. Walks will kill you. Like, it's just part of the game. And like back to Keith's point earlier, like, yeah, the metrics are great, but some of those guys that are, in said portal are in there because they can't throw strikes. And the teams that are playing on June the 13th and 14th throw a lot of strikes and field the freaking heck out of it.
Yeah, it's the other one that was impressive to me was the Bodine kid at Coastal has 2 pass balls this entire year.
Did you see the
which
stat?
is a rather impressive stat.
Yeah, I did. I saw that.
I didn't, but I would
a couple
imagine
of
that
the
it's
umpires
absurd.
who called those strikes, they need to be sent down to freaking high school. But
That's
yeah,
fine,
I mean,
but it's a lot of them, though.
Yeah, if you're watching and you want to see somebody who can receive at an incredibly high clip, and there's some really good catchers in this tournament that are still alive, but that kid is, I mean, you're talking about a kid who will probably catch in the big leagues. If nothing else, he can defend at that level, and obviously he's got some offensive numbers that certainly jive with it as well. But I mean, that's a rare level of receiving that kid is able to attain at this point. And if you're a fan of good catchers, dial in when Coastal's playing. One, they got some electric arms, but that kid does as good of a job as anybody in the country in recent years in terms of handling a staff, blocking the baseball, receiving the baseball. I mean, he's pretty special. Do we have any changes in our thoughts on who's going to make this out? Who's going to win this thing? Are you going to shift gears on LSU, Jonathan?
No, I'm not. I just think, like I said, I think with their staff, again, they've been there. They know how the rest works. Jay's been there a bunch of times. They've gotten over the hump with him. I think they'll figure out a way to navigate the rest stuff. They did it with Skeens, 2-3 years ago, whatever that was, 2 or 3 years ago. And they didn't have quite the number 2. They're deeper on the mound this time around. They're maybe just as offensive. Like, I'm not saying anybody's Paul Skeens, but when you got 2 guys now and you can kind of finagle that rotation and stuff like that, again, they know how to navigate it. I think it's horrible. It stinks that them or Arkansas won't play for a national championship because of the way the brackets are. And I would love to see if we can, if the ABCA can get, some pressure on the NCAA to maybe reseed this thing. It's big enough. It's as important as ever. I would love to see a reseed if we could, just 1 through 8, easy, simple. You don't even have to do it for the Super, but just I think for Omaha, if we get a reseed, I think it would be beneficial. So no, I'm not going to budge. I think. I mean, I'm going to be tuned in. I can tell you that to Arkansas LSU on Saturday, because that's going to be electric, just like Tennessee and Arkansas was electric this weekend. So I'm going to go LSU. I'll stick with LSU.
What do you got, Coach Glass? Who's taking home the ship?
I'm not moving off my my original prediction from the start of the tournament was that it was going to be Arkansas and Oregon State. I'm going to stick to my guns on this one. I do think that I have Arkansas winning the whole thing. Obviously, given what we just talked about from a free 90 and defensive standpoint, I mean, they stuff it on the mound. They figured it out offensively. I mean, Tennessee is it's a really good staff, and they did a really good job with them in the Supers. It was a great series, but they were, up against that staff, and to be able to get it done, I don't necessarily think that they're intimidated by much that it is that they're going to see in Omaha. Not to say that LSU is not good as the opening game, but I ultimately think that Arkansas is going to get it done. I'm impressed with Oregon State. I am. I think that at that side of the bracket is tough as well. I mean, Arizona, I was super impressed with. I talked about at the top, and Coastal is just they're really, really good. I'm going to stick with what I went with originally. I do think Oregon State's really good. They beat a really good Florida State team. They can pitch it, they defend, they can hit. They've been to Omaha in the past as well. So I don't think it's a foreign concept for them to be there and have the moment get too big. So I'm gonna stick Arkansas, Oregon State in the finals, and I'm sticking with the Omaha Hogs to knock down Dave Van Horn's championship.
Yeah, I'm on the same boat. I think one of the things that can be really interesting is that there is if I'm recalling the format correctly, there's a decent chance Arkansas and LSU play 3 times. Because if it's double elimination on that side, like that gets
it's essentially the revert. You're back to a regional and then a super regional format more or less. So it's 4-team tournament, double elimination. Winner goes to the championship, 3-game set.
You could see Arkansas and LSU play 3 times. I think that's a distinct possibility, which would be electric. But yeah, I'm sticking with Arkansas. Like on paper, they are the best team. It's not really debatable. They're top 15 in every significant offensive category, and they're top 12 in every significant pitching category in the country. No other team in the field right now achieves at that level across the board. With that being said, it's College World Series. Like they're going to need to play their best baseball. That first game might be the decider in terms of who makes it out of that side, whoever wins the LSU Arkansas game, because we all know it's really tough to come out of a double elimination if you lose number 1. So it'll be interesting to see how that happens. Very curious to see UCLA. I kind of said that at the top. I think they're playing really well. They've been playing really well all year, but I think they're a little bit under the radar. I think some of the other stuff that happened in the regionals and the supers might have got overlooked a little bit, but they've been, for lack of a better term, they've kind of been taking belt to ass on people here for a couple weeks, and we'll see if they're able to keep that momentum in Omaha here. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be awesome. This time of year it's so fun to watch these guys compete. It's great to have a Cinderella story there with Murray State. I mean, it's why college baseball is so fun. It's why it's so fun to watch. It's why you have to watch it if you're a college baseball fan, because this stuff happens when it's not supposed to. Like Murray State is not supposed to be in the College World Series, but they are. So that team plays their ass off. They got some really good players. Make no mistake, like this isn't a bunch of overachievers. There's some really good baseball players on this team.
That leadoff hitter can swat. Like there's some serious. That kid's got like 22 bolts, and he generates some bat speed, and he can lose a baseball quickly, boy.
Yeah, they're 15th in the country in runs scored, 17th in on base percentage. They're hitting 306 as a team, and they're 7th in the country in doubles per game. They're hitting 2.5 doubles a game. Like this is a really talented offense, and you could have made the case before the tournament that some of those numbers were inflated because they were playing in whatever conference. You could play that game, but it is all of that stuff has held true through a regional and in a super regional. So to this point, there's really no debating. That's a dangerous offensive team. Excited to see what they do. I hope they shake some things up. I'd love to see them wreak a little havoc. I think it's this is why you watch sports like this, because cool stuff like this happens. Any closing thoughts, fellas?
Go watch it. Like this weekend's gonna be awesome for college baseball. I Father's Day, sit around watching baseball all day. Whew, can't find a better day to do it.
Jonathan?
Let me out.
Yeah.
You know that. I'll watch Murray State against Kentucky on a Tuesday in February. If I get a double dip on Father's Day, man, I'm in. Lock and loaded, baby. Nah, they're going to be awesome. Obviously starts Friday. Get out and watch it, man. Just see how, like you guys said, just see how good some of these players are, and it's a celebration. I think it's so unique. I can't remember. I think it's Ryan McGee did it on Twitter. If you can find it on ESPN, just like what Omaha means to the sport of college baseball. And he makes a good point. The Final Four moves, the national championship changes in college football. But Omaha's been there for college baseball for since the 50s, I believe it was. Like, it's such a cool thing. The town absolutely loves it. The town eats it up. The fan bases are awesome. You obviously got two monster fan bases in terms of LSU and Arkansas that will be there. Coastal should travel really well. Again, they've had a phenomenal support system there. I think they'll travel really well, especially with how well they're playing. It's going to be, Louisville will have a good fan base. I mean, I think Keith, you said it, like the atmosphere in Louisville was freaking awesome this weekend. So you got a lot of really good fan bases. You got a lot of people, and ultimately it's a celebration of an entire season, but we get 10 days of it, which is so cool because, the Final Four is 2 days, the national championship in football, even if you say the Final Four, it's 2 days, but this is the ultimate pinnacle for these coaching staffs, these players. It's just, you don't even have to say anything. And when you just say Omaha, it's like, gotcha. So get out, watch it, enjoy it. Enjoy Father's Day for any dads listening, that are going to watch it and lock in on it, and, sit down with your son, and, hopefully he'll have a dream that will be, an opportunity for him to do that and go there one day. So.
Yeah, it's electric. Tune in, carve out some time. It's awesome baseball. The history of it. I mean, it's nothing like it in college sports, that's for sure. So tune in. Thank you for listening, everybody. We will reconvene on this at some point to kind of unpack what happened in Omaha. But until then, tune in next time. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for listening this week. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and smash that like button for us. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at EMD Baseball. If you want to find out what me and Keith do to help families and players navigate the recruiting process, go ahead and check us out on emdbaseball.com. Take a few minutes to check out our new online academy. I promise you'll get some good information out of that. Thanks again for listening. Check in with you next week.